Today we're resuming our lesson on the holy days, on the set-apart days, on the set-apart times. And today we're looking at Sukkot. And as usual, let's go to Leviticus chapter 23. Chapter 23, verses 33 through 44. And God spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, on the 15th day of the 7th new moon is the festival of Sukkot, for 7 days to God. On the first day is a set-apart gathering. You do no servile work. For 7 days you bring an offering made by fire to God. On the 8th day there shall be a set-apart gathering for you, and you shall bring an offering made by fire to God. It's a closing festival. You do no servile work. These are the appointed times of God, which you proclaim as set-apart gatherings, to bring an offering made by fire to God, an ascending offering and a grain offering, a slaughtering and a drink offerings, as commanded for every day. Besides the Sabbaths of God, and besides your gifts, besides all your vows, and besides all your voluntary offerings, which you give to God. On the 15th day of the 7th new moon, when you gather in the fruit of the land, celebrate the festival of God for 7 days. On the first day is a rest, on the 8th day is a rest. And you shall take for yourselves on the first day of the fruit of good trees, branches of palm trees, twigs of leafy trees, and willows of the stream, and shall rejoice before God your Elohim for 7 days. And you shall celebrate it as a festival to God for 7 days in the year, a law forever in your generations. Celebrate it in the 7th new moon. Dwell in booths for 7 days. All who are native born in Israel dwell in booths, so that your generations know that I made the children of Israel dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am God your Elohim." Thus did Moses speak to the appointed times of God to the children of Israel. Sukkot is probably the most fun feast out of all of them. We are literally commanded to celebrate for 8 days. And it's a time where it's not just our community, it's not just Israel. It's time to invite the Gentiles, invite everybody, people who are even slightly interested in what we're doing, to come and celebrate in the outdoors. We're commanded to dwell in booths and be outside. Remember the time that the Israelites were pulled out of Egypt and they spent years wandering in booths or tents. Remember that event, and it's a big celebration, a time to honor God. And it also has some clues to what might be in the future. So let's take a look at Sukkot. A lot of the commandments revolve around the temple. So let's take a look at those. Let's turn to Numbers 29, verses 12 through 40. And on the 15th day of the 7th new moon, you have a set-apart gathering. You do no servile work, and you shall celebrate a festival to God 7 days. And you shall bring near an ascending offering, an offering made by fire, a sweet fragrance to God. 13 young bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs a year old, perfect ones they are. And their grain offering, fine flour mixed with oil, 3/10 of an ephah for each of the 13 bulls, 2/10 for each of the 2 rams, and 1/10 for each of the 14 lambs. And 1 male goat as a sin offering, besides the continual ascending offering, its grain offering, and its drink offering. Then on the second day, 12 young bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs a year old, perfect ones, and their grain offering and their drink offerings for the bulls, for the rams, and for the lambs, by their number, according to the right ruling. And 1 male goat as a sin offering, besides the continual ascending offerings with its grain offering and their drink offerings. And on the third day, 11 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs, a year old, perfect ones. And their grain offering and their drink offerings for the bulls, for the rams, and for the lambs, by their number, according to the right ruling. And 1 goat as a sin offering, besides the continual ascending offering, its grain offering, and its drink offering. Then on the 4th day, 10 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs, a year old, perfect ones. And their grain offering and their drink offerings for the bulls, for the rams, and for the lambs, by their number, according to the right ruling. And 1 male goat as a sin offering, besides the continual ascending offering, its grain offering, and its drink offering. Then on the 5th day, 9 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs, a year old, perfect ones. And their grain offering and their drink offerings for the bulls, for the rams, and for the lambs, by their number, according to the right ruling. and one goat as a sin offering, besides the continual ascending offering, its grain offering, and its drink offering. Then on the 6th day, 8 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs, a year old, perfect ones, and their grain offering and their drink offerings for the bulls, for the rams, and for the lambs, by their number, according to the right ruling. And one goat as a sin offering, besides the continual ascending offering, its grain offering, and its drink offering. Then on the 7th day, 7 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs a year old, perfect ones, and their grain offering and their drink offerings for the bulls, for the rams, and for the lambs, by their number, according to the right ruling. And one goat as a sin offering, besides the continual ascending offering, its grain offering, and its drink offering. On the 8th day you have an assembly, you do no servile work, and you shall bring near an ascending offering, an offering made by fire, a sweet fragrance to God. 1 bull, 1 ram, 7 lambs a year old, perfect ones. Their grain offering and their drink offerings for the bull, for the ram, and for the lambs, by their number, according to the right ruling. And 1 goat as a sin offering, besides the continual ascending offering, its grain offering, and its drink offering. These you prepare to God at your appointed times, besides your vowed offerings and your voluntary offerings, as your ascending offerings and your grain offerings, as your drink offerings and your peace offerings. And Moses spoke to the children of Israel according to all God had commanded Moses. So as you can see, there were a massive amount of sacrifices required at the temple during Sukkot, more than any other holy day. There were so many bulls and sheep and lambs being sacrificed, and I'll put a list up here of what was required on each day, but the priests must have been exhausted slaughtering all of these animals. But it was a party, it was a celebration, and God wanted to be involved too. And sacrifices were, it always says they're a pleasing fragrance to him. So he wanted to have fun along with the other people. Let's also take a look at Exodus 23, verses 14 through 19. 3 times in the year you are to celebrate a festival to me. Guard the festival of Matzah. 7 days you eat unleavened bread, as I commanded you, at the time appointed in the new moon of Abib. For in it you came out of Egypt, and did not appear before me empty-handed. And the festival of the harvest, the firstfruits of your labors, which you have sown in the field. And the festival of the ingathering, at the outgoing of the year, when you have gathered in the fruit of your labors from the field. 3 times in the year all your males are to appear before the Master God. Do not slaughter the blood of my slaughterings with leavened bread, and the fat of my festival shall not remain until morning. Bring the firstfruits of your land into the house of God your Elohim. Sukkot was one of those very special festivals where all men had to appear at the temple. We also learn from these verses that God doesn't want leftovers. All of the food needs to be eaten on the festival or burned, because it's a celebration. So live it up and eat all the food that's there. Of course, we don't have the temple today. So let's take a look at some Jewish traditions, what Jews do for Sukkot. You could call this the Talmud, you could call it oral Torah, whatever, traditions basically. First, we are commanded to dwell in booths or tents or temporary structures during Sukkot. So the Jews build their own tents or structures. They call them sukkahs. And there are very specific rules for how to build a sukkah. So let's read Mishnah Sukkah, chapter 1, verse 1. A sukkah, to clarify, its roofing, which is the main and most crucial element of the mitzvah, that is more than 20 cubits high, is unfit. Rabbi Yehuda deems it fit. Similarly, a sukkah that is not even 10 handbreadths high, and one that does not have 3 walls, and one whose sunlight that passes through the roof is greater than its shade, are unfit. With regard to an old sukkah, Beit Shami deem it unfit for the mitzvah of sukkah, and Beit Hillel deem it fit. So here are the rules for how to build a sukkah. It cannot be built under a tree. It must contain at least 3 walls. The roof must be made of plant matter, and the plant matter has to be thick enough to block out most of the sunlight, but not thick enough that rain can't come through the roof. Jews also are required to light candles in their sukkah, and at the bare minimum, eat a meal in the sukkah. Next, in Leviticus, we are commanded to take several branches of 4 different types of trees and bind them together and use them during Sukkot. The Jews call this a lulav, and there are 4 specific types of trees that they say we need the branches from. One is a citron, which is sort of like a lemon, but different, and it grows in Israel. Another is a palm branch, 2 willow branches, and 3 myrtle branches. And generally, when Jews celebrate with the lulav, they shake the lulav in 6 directions around their sukkah every day during the festival. Just a few other traditions that Jews do. There's lots of singing, dancing, playing music. Jews tend to circle the bima, or the podium on which the Torah is read. Also, 2 loaves of challah are eaten with every dinner during Sukkot, which sounds delicious. It's common to read Psalms during Sukkot, and also read through Ecclesiastes. The sukkah, or the temporary shelter made of plant matter, naturally it's going to look really bright and vibrant in the beginning of the week, but as the week progresses, the sukkah gets sadder and more gray and more sort of dead, because the sukkah is meant to represent our mortality. The idea of we are put on this earth for a set period of time, and this isn't our permanent home, it's our temporary home. So the sukkah is kind of a reminder that we will age, we'll grow older, we'll eventually die. So another book that Jews read is Ecclesiastes, which is all about how life is fleeting and how there are better things to come in the future. Lastly, on the 8th day of Sukkot, 2 men will go to the front of their gathering. One man will read the last chapter of Deuteronomy, and the next man will read the first chapter in Genesis. Jews have this tradition called the Torah portions, where every week they read a small portion of the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. And by reading these, you actually read through the Torah in a year. And the 8th day of Sukkot is the end of the Torah and the beginning of the next year's Torah. So this is a very important ceremony to sort of close the Torah and start over again to read it again next year. So how should we celebrate Sukkot today? Well, we definitely have some guidelines. Leviticus actually gives us a lot to go on, and there's a few other verses we can look at too. Let's go ahead and take a look at Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 22 through 27. You shall tithe without fail all the yield of your grain that the field brings forth year by year. You shall eat before God your Elohim in the place where he chooses to make his name dwell, the tithe of your grain and your new wine and your oil, and the firstlings of your herds and your sheep, so that you learn to fear God your Elohim always. But when the way is too long for you, so that you are not able to bring the tithe, or when the place where God your Elohim chooses to put his name is too far from you, when God your Elohim is blessing you, then you shall give it in silver, and you shall take the silver in your hand and go to the place where God your Elohim chooses. And you shall use the silver for whatever your being desires, for cattle or sheep, for wine or strong drink, or whatever your being desires. And you shall eat there before God your Elohim, and you shall rejoice, you and your household. And do not forsake the Levi, who is within your gates, for he has no part nor inheritance with you. Yes, you heard that right. The Bible commands us to drink alcohol on Sukkot. It is a party. It's a celebration. We are commanded to go buy meat and wine and strong drink that we want during this celebration. God wants us to have a good time on Sukkot. Let's also take a look at Deuteronomy 16, verses 13 through 17. Perform the festival of Sukkot for 7 days after the ingathering from your threshing floor and your winepress. And you shall rejoice in your festival, you and your son and your daughter and your male servant and your female servant and the Levite and the stranger and the fatherless and the widow who are in your gates. For 7 days you shall celebrate to God your Elohim in the place which God chooses. Because God your Elohim does bless you in all your increase and in all the work of your hands, and you shall be only rejoicing. 3 times in a year all your males appear before God your Elohim in the place which he chooses, at the festival of Matzah, at the festival of Shavuot, and at the festival of Sukkot. And none should appear before God empty-handed, but each one with the gift of his hand, according to the blessing of God your Elohim, which he has given you. Sukkot was a harvest festival. There are 3 harvests in the Israel agricultural calendar. There's a barley harvest, a wheat harvest, and a grape harvest, and that's where Sukkot falls. Sukkot is the grape harvest. And as usual with most harvest festivals, it's a celebration. It's a time to thank God for the produce of the year. Grapes especially, which are used to make wine, is, a cause for celebration. We're commanded to not only celebrate with our family and our immediate community, but also sort of our extended communities, particularly taking care of the fatherless and the widows. We're also told not to appear to God empty-handed. We're supposed to bring a gift because he's blessed us with the harvest for the year, so we need to sort of return the favor and bring a gift to him. We have a fairly good example of what to do during Sukkot in Nehemiah chapter 8, verse 14 through 18. And they found written in the Torah, which God had commanded by Moses, that the children of Israel should dwell in booths in the festival of the 7th new moon, and that they should announce and proclaim in all their cities and in Jerusalem, saying, Go out to the mountain, and bring olive branches, branches of oil trees, and myrtle branches, and palm branches, and branches of leafy trees, to make booths, as it's written. So the people went out and brought them, and made themselves booths, each one on the roof of his house, and in their courtyards, and in the courtyards of the house of Elohim, and in the open space of the water gate, and in the open space of the gate of Ephraim. And the entire assembly of those who had come back from the captivity made booths and sat under the booths. For since the days of Joshua son of Nun until that day, the children of Israel had not done so, and there was very great rejoicing. And day by day, from the first day until the last day, he read from the book of the Torah of Elohim. And they performed the festival 7 days, and on the 8th day there was an assembly, according to the right ruling. So going back to that question of how do we celebrate Sukkot today? So we have some pretty clear-cut commands that we do need to follow. The first command is we are commanded to dwell in booths, or a temporary shelter. What is a booth? That's kind of up for you and your family to decide. It could be a tent, or a camper, or it could even be a hotel room. And what does it mean to dwell in your booth? Well, it could be you just eat a meal in the booth. Maybe you just have dinner with your family. Or it could mean that you spend all day in your booth. Also, we are commanded that the first day of Sukkot and the 8th day of Sukkot are Sabbaths, and we are not to work on those days. We're also commanded to make what the Jews call a lulav, which is a bundle of branches put together, and we're commanded to wave them around our booths every day. Definitely something we need to do. Lastly, and maybe most importantly, we're commanded to have a good time during Sukkot. It's a celebration, and we're told to buy strong drink and good food. We're told to celebrate with our families and our gatherings. And if possible, invite people from outside the gatherings to come and take a look at what this Torah observant Christianity thing looks like. It's a time to celebrate God freeing Israel from the Egyptians, and to celebrate him freeing us from our sins. And it has some clues as to what things may look like in the future. Let's transition a bit. Is Sukkot connected to Jesus? Yes, it is. It has some very strong connections, and we need to take a look at them. Let's start with John chapter 7, verses 1 through 3, and then I'll skip to verses 37 through 41. And after this, Jesus was walking in Galilee, for he did not wish to walk in Judea, because the Jews were seeking to kill him. And the festival of the Jews was near, the festival of Sukkot. So his brothers said to him, "Get away from here and go into Judea, so that your taught ones also see the works you are doing." I'm going to skip ahead here. Jesus tells them that he is not going to go to Sukkot, and they go on ahead. And he actually comes later in secret because men are commanded to go to the temple during Sukkot. Fast forward, and he says something profound. Starting in verse 37, "And on the last day, the great day of the festival, Jesus stood and cried out, saying, 'If anyone thirsts, let him come to me, and let him who believes in me drink. As the scripture said, out of his innermost shall flow rivers of living water.' And this he said concerning the Spirit, which those believing in him were about to receive. For the set-apart Spirit was not yet given, because Jesus was not yet esteemed. Many from the crowd, when they heard the word, then said, 'This is truly the prophet.' Others said, 'This is the Messiah.'" There is a lot going on here, and we might miss a lot of it if we don't know the Jewish traditions that are going on at this time. So let's look into that a little bit. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 12, verses 3 through 4. "And you shall draw water with joy from the fountains of deliverance. And in that day you shall say, 'Praise God, call upon his name, make known his deeds among the peoples, make mention that his name is exalted.'" So when Isaiah says draw the waters, he's actually referring to a physical well that existed in Israel. It was called the Pool of Solomon. Obviously, it was sort of coronated while Solomon was king. But there was this very important ceremony that revolved around this pool, called the water libation ceremony. So let's take a look at what that is. Every day during the festival of Sukkot, a group of priests would march down to Solomon's well, the Pool of Solomon. They would take this jug, and they would go to the well, and they would dip it in the water and pull it up. And the moment that water was out of the well and in the jug was called salvation. Now, if you know your Hebrew, you know that salvation means Yeshua in Hebrew. Interesting. Now, the priests would take this jug back to Jerusalem, and it was this big celebration where musicians and jugglers would be following the priests and playing the whole way back. In fact, there's a verse in Mishnah Sukkot that talks about this a little bit. Let's read it real quick. "One who did not see the celebration of the place of the drawing of the water never saw celebration in his days." So the priests would enter the temple with this jug of water called Yeshua. They would approach the altar and they would pour the water onto the altar. This happened every day during Sukkot, and it culminated in the final day, the 8th day, which was the biggest day of the festival. This is the day where anyone who was anyone was there. All the rabbis, all the rabbi students, anyone sort of connected to the temple would have been there. The courtyard would have been packed with people, and there probably would have been people up on the walls to see this. The Mishnah Sukkot talks about how there were these massive candelabras that, when lit, they would sort of light up half of Jerusalem. This was this huge, massive event. So picture it. Anyone who's anyone is there. This is the final day of this great celebration. And this man stands up and says, "If anyone wants true water, come to me." And immediately, these men who are so deep in the Torah make the connection to Isaiah. Remember Isaiah 12. "In that day you shall say, 'Praise God, call upon his name, make known his deeds among the peoples. make mention that his name is exalted. These holy men figure out that Jesus is making all the connections in this one ceremony. And up till now, he has tried to keep his ministry quiet. He has tried to keep it secret. But this is the official announcement that he is the Messiah that everyone has been waiting for. This is a huge deal. And I think a lot of that gets lost because we don't know the context of what the water libation ceremony is. This would be like him standing in the middle of the Super Bowl and saying that he is the Messiah. I think it's just mind-blowing. And I think what adds to that is he did it on Sukkot, which is this 8-day celebration. And on the climax of the celebration, at the very end, he says, I'm here. The one you've been waiting for is here. And it's time to really celebrate. And sadly, things don't turn into a celebration. But we can celebrate him today, and I think we should during Sukkot. So I've been giving you hints where I've been saying maybe Sukkot points to something in the future. We're going to take a look at that now because I think there are some deep prophetic implications with Sukkot. Let's take a look at Zechariah chapter 14, verses 16 through 19. And it shall be that all who are left from all the nations which came up against Jerusalem shall go up from year to year to bow themselves to the sovereign, God of hosts, and to celebrate the festival of Sukkot. And it shall be that if any one of the clans of the earth does not come up to Jerusalem to bow himself to the sovereign, God of hosts, on them there is to be no rain. And if the clan of Egypt does not come up and enter in, then there is no rain. On them is the plague, with which God plagues the nations who do not come up to celebrate the festival of Sukkot. This is the punishment of Egyptians and the punishment of all the nations that do not come up to celebrate the festival of Sukkot. I didn't tell you all the context there of Zechariah, but I'll tell you, this happens after Jesus returns. A lot of us call this the millennial reign. It says in the Bible that when Jesus comes back, he will reign on earth for 1,000 years. This takes place during the millennial reign, which means Sukkot is going to take place during the millennial reign. And we're told that if we don't go and celebrate it, then we won't get rain, which is very bad, especially if you're a farmer and you like food. So definitely important that we be celebrating Sukkot today because we're going to be celebrating it in the future for sure. In fact, I don't have any scriptures prepared to talk about this, but there are several verses in the Old Testament that talk about a greater exodus. It says that the exodus will be so great that we won't even remember the first exodus. And I have strong feelings that this greater exodus is connected to the millennial reign. And remember, the first exodus, God freed Israel from the Egyptians. And what did they do to get to Canaan, the promised land? They dwelt in booths. And remember, Sukkot is a remembrance of dwelling in booths and the good works that God did to take them out of Egypt. And we are looking forward to this second exodus, this greater exodus. And what might we be doing on that second exodus? We might be dwelling in booths. So maybe Sukkot isn't just for remembrance of things that were. Maybe Sukkot is training for things to come. If you've ever been camping, you know that the first time you go camping, it's hard. You probably forgot a lot of things. You're not prepared for the weather and how to cook certain foods and how to stay hygienic out in the wilderness. But the more you camp, the better you get at it. And after a dozen times of camping, it gets pretty easy. It's much better than the first time camping. What if Sukkot is a way of training us for this second Exodus that's coming. Wouldn't it be easier to live in booths in the future when we've already been doing it today? And maybe the millennial reign doesn't come in our lifetimes. Shouldn't we be teaching this to our children so they know how to camp, so they know how to dwell in booths? Just something to think about. I highly suggest you look into the millennial reign, you look into the greater Exodus. And I think it has some clear connections to the set-apart day of Sukkot. So that's all I got for Sukkot. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. If you disagree with me, please feel free to reach out. If you have something you want to add, please feel free to reach out. I want this to be a discussion, not just me talking at you. I look forward to the next time together. Next, we're going to be talking about Passover and the Feast of Matzah. Hope to see you then. Verses 33 through 44. And God spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, I love you too, Daisy.